So let's start with the big story that we're tracking on WION this hour, where just a day after the 15 Asia-Pacific nations signed what is now going to be the world's biggest free trade deal that does not, interestingly, include the world's biggest economy, the United States of America, top sources within the Indian government have confirmed to WION that India is pretty firm in its stance. India will not be joining the China-backed deal. Now, the RCEP had invited India to take part at least as an observer member. It has even left the window open for India to join the RCEP in the near future. Remember, India was actually one of the original 16 participating nations when the RCEP's idea was mooted way back in 2012, but it withdrew from this grouping for a free trade agreement last year for several reasons. The key among which was that it did not want the Indian markets to be flooded by cheap Chinese imports. And that is the reason why India has decided not to be a part of the RCEP. Now, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership is the world's largest trade body in terms of GDP. The bloc includes the 10 Southeast Asian economies along with China, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand and Australia. The world's biggest free trade deal excludes the United States, and it covers over 2 billion people and accounts for almost about 30% of the world's GDP. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what's actually being decided within the corridors of power in New Delhi, we joined in by WION Siddhant Sibil. He's joining us live on this broadcast. Now, good afternoon to you, Siddhant. This was, of course, something that was expected, and now India is pretty firm in its stance that we may not even want to be a part of the RCEP, even as observers there.
Well, yes, Mohammed, it is now confirmed that India is not going to have a relook at the decision it took last year. Remember, it was last year that India announced that it's not going to take part in the Mega Trade Pact, and top sources in the Indian government has confirmed to WION that the policy continues and India will not be taking part, whether as a full-fledged member participating in the RCEP despite the invitation being sent, or as an observer member also, given the fact that the concerns which New Delhi had haven't been cleared when it comes to several issues. Biggest, of course, as you just mentioned, is the Indian market being flooded by cheap Chinese goods. And also, if at this point India rejoins or relooks at the RCEP, it is like awarding the Chinese government for the things it has done. If you look in the geopolitical context, especially when it comes to the deteriorating relationship between India and China after the Galwan incident. In fact, just last week, at several occasions, at the highest level, India has raised concerns about several things, of course, which will not go down well in Beijing, whether it is the South China Sea issue or whether it is territorial integrity. We know that the Indian Prime Minister was addressing at the India-ASEAN summit, and also the Indian External Affairs Minister addressed the East Asia summit on the Diwali day itself and reiterated India's concern regarding the countries being aggressive. So by and large, trade is closely linked with the geopolitical development, and India has made it clear that when it comes to its economic sovereignty, India will not let it be violative of any country. And of course, what will be India's next focus is to increase its trade forays with countries on a bilateral scale, whether it's with Japan, whether it's with Australia, or whether in fact it is with ASEAN. Because remember, just last week, this specific question was asked. This was before the decision or the signing of the RCEP happened to the MEA, that will India take a relook at RCEP, and the response was that India's stance continues the same, and what India would like to do is to increase its trade forays with the ASEAN grouping.
Right. And also, Siddhant, it's important that you stated that India, of course, is protecting its own trade interests by not joining the RCEP. It does not want the Indian markets to be flooded by the cheap Chinese imports. But what is interesting in all of this, of course, is that China still persists that India can continue as an observer status and can join the RCEP later. But India has said that it does not even want to be a part of the RCEP as an observer there. This clearly is a snub for China.
Well, more than snub, it is a recognition of the fact that how big the Indian market is, how lucrative the Indian market is, and this is a market that nobody wants to give up, and that is why this special concession has been extended to New Delhi by the RCEP grouping, by of course inviting it as an observer member and also inviting it to become part of the grouping at any time it wants. It shows that the power of the Indian market is something that will be missing, and RCEP will not be considered a complete grouping without India being part of it. China, of course, is one of the largest economy in the RCEP grouping, and of course dominating the RCEP pact, and that is the fear when it comes to New Delhi, that it is an attempt by the Chinese to write the economic rules in the region and something that is going to negatively impact New Delhi. Other than that, there is also a thinking that FTAs or free trade agreement haven't worked for New Delhi. India has several FTAs with the regional countries in the region, and it hasn't given the positive development or the positive aspect to the people here, to the farmers, to the industrialists, and that is something that was also playing in the backdrop for the decision which New Delhi has made. So by and large, several reasons, but biggest of course the China factor and the rules being written by China. Interestingly, while the RCEP countries have gone ahead with the pact and India is not part of it, they haven't extended the same kind of, to use the phrase, royal treatment to Washington, and they have considered India as worthy of this royal treatment of being invited as an observer member, because they do understand that without India, RCEP won't get that much leverage as it is expected to.
All right, we'll have to leave there. Thank you very much indeed, Siddhant Civil, for joining us and getting us all those latest updates.